ORCAS students, my name is Alexis. I work for the Tryon Creek Watershed Council, which is an organization that basically works to keep this creek behind me healthy. When I was editing this video, I realized it might be kind of confusing to explain this without some visuals, so I'm going to show some maps on the screen and then we'll go back to me at the creek. So this map shows Oregon and Washington. The blue lines show the Willamette River and the Columbia River. The Willamette River is coming up from the bottom of the screen, and then it meets the Columbia River, which is flowing towards the west and eventually reaching the Pacific Ocean. Portland is in the area where the Willamette River meets the Columbia River just north of town. So there are smaller creeks that flow into the Columbia and Willamette Rivers, and all these little arrows show the direction that that water moves on its way towards the bigger rivers. The colored areas are the watersheds, so the different blocks show the spaces where the water that falls goes towards those arrows and into the bigger rivers. Tryon Creek is in the black circle, and that's the area where the Tryon Creek Watershed Council, my organization, works. Now, back to me at the creek. And this creek starts right here in Portland, and there are several creeks running through Portland that go into the Willamette River. And then the Willamette River goes into the Columbia River. And so these small creeks that can start in our neighborhoods are really connected to the environment here in Oregon. And so a watershed is the area of land where all the water that's falling goes into a common place. So for the Tryon Creek watershed, we're looking at all of the spaces of land where when it rains, like it's raining right now, it goes into Tryon Creek, which is flowing behind me under that bridge. We like to talk about watersheds because what happens on the land affects what happens in the water. And so we work to keep the water healthy, so we need to make sure that the land is healthy as well. And there are a couple different things that we pay attention to. A lot of creeks in urban areas aren't very healthy, but this is one of the ones that is. And one of the ways we can tell if a creek is healthy or not is based on the fish that do or don't live there. And there is a healthy fish population of coastal cutthroat trout that live in Tryon Creek. And one of the things that those fish need is for the water to stay cold. So they need a lot of shade, and shade often comes from the trees that are along the side of the creek. And so something that organizations like watershed councils do is we will plant plants, like you can see this young tree right there, and another one right over there. We'll plant some young trees so that as they grow up nice and tall and mature, they will be providing the shade onto the creek. Since I got here, the water has started moving faster, and I've been seeing just bits and pieces of logs and branches moving through. What's happening over there is the water is getting mixed in and bubbled, where you see it kind of looking white. That is actually mixing oxygen into the water, which is good for the animals that live there. But sometimes we get too much water too fast, and that can be problematic because it can scrape away the soil that we need for our plants to grow from. When it rains in the city, a lot of the time the water just hits our parking lots and our roads. And that water can't soak into that ground. It can't soak into those surfaces. So it moves really quickly through the pipes and to the creek. And when it gets there, it often is carrying pollution, and there's a lot of it that comes really fast. Compare that to a forest where plants can interrupt the water on its way to the ground, and then the plants themselves actually filter the water and clean it. So one of the things that you can keep an eye out for near you is what's called a bioswale. So when you see places where water is being directed into a planter, that's actually connected underground to our pipes. But because the water first passes through some plants, it slows down the all of that water and provides a chance for the water to be cleaner before it eventually reaches the creek. Another problem that we try to address is what's called invasive species. So invasive species or invasive plants are plants that aren't from the area where they're now growing. So all of this green stuff on the side of all of these trees is actually a plant from England called English ivy, and it's growing on the ground too. And what happens with English ivy is that as it grows on the trees, the vines get very thick and heavy and make the trees more likely to fall down. So we want our tree trunks to look more like these two, where there's nothing growing on them. So you can see how the ivy is growing up the side of the trees. We don't want that, because these vines that are small right now can actually get about this big, and that makes our trees that are growing less healthy and more likely to fall over. So Tryon Creek is in southwest Portland, and I asked ORCAS staff, and it sounds like a lot of you live more towards southeast or northeast Portland or Gresham, and there are creeks near you there too. There's Johnson Creek, there's the Columbia Slough, and there's also the Sandy River. And so there are places where you can experience nature and hike and look at the water, flow through. Those creeks also have fish in them. And there's watershed councils that work to keep those creeks healthy too. So hopefully next year we can meet in person at Tryon Creek, and I can walk you through the forest there. But for now, welcome to Portland, and I hope that you can find some places to experience the nature around you. Take care.